Hello and welcome to The Green Door Life. My name is Shannon Morse and I'm here with my lovely girlfriend, Anastasia Sauvage. And we are here today as we're going through this incredible time of the coronavirus. Today is March 20th, 2020, and we are maybe like 2 months or so, or even longer into this. But right now in the last week or 2 weeks, we've really started to feel the impact as a collective of what's happening in the world. And outside of that, there is a lot of other things happening in our planet that is affected by our planetary solar system. So I had this idea yesterday and I thought of Anastasia because Anastasia is a master of a few things. One of them would be astrology, the other would be tarot and the Enneagram. So I wanted to bring her on to share a little bit more about what's going on in the world outside of just the coronavirus and the economic structures that are starting to feel the impact, but also how we can use these tools to help to understand the bigger picture of what's happening right now. So I will introduce you all to Anastasia right now, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more about how we can use these tools and understand a little bit more about them. So Anna, would you like to say hello and then kind of maybe give us like a little brief overview of what these three aspects are?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anastasia. So there's a lot going on right now. A lot of this was kicked off in January, on January 12th. So basically, the three modalities that I really like to use to work with everything that's going on and have a little bit more information coming from a greater source are astrology, tarot, and the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a little bit more about like self-inquiry and personal, like personality typing, but astrology and tarot are super useful in times like this. So with astrology, you have your natal chart, which is like your special snowflake of who you are. And the planets affect that chart called transits. So the transiting planets and what they're doing right now have an energetic play with you specifically. So this is affecting everybody differently. You're going to see it show up in different areas of people's lives, and it's not all the same, though there is a general trend with everything that's going on. So I like to look at it as kind of microcosmic within the self and macrocosmic with everything and everyone. So, yeah, astrology to me is like your birth chart is sort of like a clock, you know, and so the clock isn't making it midnight, but it's indicating that it is midnight. So that's kind of how the planetary energies affect you. And it just kind of plays into almost like a magnetic pole, like magnetic filings that pull like bits and pieces of personality, and that kind of manifests into what you're seeing every day and within yourself. Yeah. And so I find that tarot is a really awesome tool to use with that, because not only are you getting all of this like planetary energy that's coming through, but you can use the cards as imagery to kind of speak on what's happening, maybe in a smaller sense, like microcosmic with you and like macrocosmic with everything else. So with tarot, you can kind of like look at any particular piece that you want to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the thing about tarot that I like to sort of disclaim beforehand is that I don't really believe that the cards are like enchanted magical items exactly, but rather they kind of play on the laws of synchronicity, where you see repeating numbers, you see repeating animals, and you're kind of like, okay, what does this mean? Maybe it's tied into something that is very synchronistic. So I think that the cards play on that synchronicity with the imagery, and it comes up and it brings a little bit more to the table for dialogue and more self-inquiry, and kind of like giving you a place to start from in terms of looking more deeply into a situation at hand. So those are awesome. And maybe we'll talk about the Enneagram separately, but
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I love that. And I already have questions here.
Oh, cool.
So when we look at what's happening with the world right now in terms of astrology,
Yeah.
what are you can see that are like some of the things that would be helpful for people to understand as something like they may be experiencing in their body to know that this is like a greater thing at play?
Yeah. So, like understanding in their body how.
I guess what I mean is, like, let's say that I woke up this morning and I was like, I was having such a great day yesterday. I woke up this morning and now I'm kind of feeling, I don't know, like a little bit like in a like sullen mood, or, you know, whatever the case might be. Like, what's happening in our world today in astrology that could be indicators, a little bit about what we talked about yesterday, right?
Totally. Yeah. So, that is, sorry about that. That's when you want to look at the transits. So the transits are what I was explaining earlier, how the planets affect your chart specifically. So, for example, we've got all the different planets moving in the different signs, and they go through all these different cycles and coming back to the signs. And we've got some really key players right now, which are Pluto and Saturn. And so those two are two of the most intense archetypes of the entire spread of planets. And so it's all about Saturn being structure and Pluto being like regeneration and transformation and rebirth. So they're both in Capricorn, which is all about like big world structure. So you're seeing the economy, you're seeing big business, politics, everything is just like fully being examined and like crumbling essentially. And so if you think about Pluto as kind of the great destroyer and like the cleanser, you know, Hades, god of death. And then you have Saturn, who is he's technically Kronos, but also like responsibility and structures in place. And so when they come together like that, everything just kind of, anything that isn't serving the highest and best good is going away very fast. And so right now we have Mars, who moves more quickly. Saturn and Pluto move kind of slow. So we see this as more of a general theme with like years, but with Mars moves within weeks. So Mars has been coming up to Saturn and Pluto for a while now, and just a couple days ago, if not exactly yesterday, Mars got very close to Saturn. And that's when a lot of this like really intense, like people might have been feeling a little bit more hot and like fiery tempers. Aries is who rules Mars. It's like the god of war, you know? So you bring in all of this heat and all this tension. And I feel like yesterday was just kind of one of the first days where people started to feel a little bit restless, want to get outside. We've been seeing a lot of people walking around outside when we should definitely be inside. More people bickering, more couples getting into fights, people feeling a little bit more angry deep inside. And it's just this heat of Mars that's like passing through and igniting and activating a lot of the bigger picture. And especially with the Saturn Pluto stuff is massive. And also Jupiter is in there too. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So actually it's Mars and Jupiter that came together. Mars and Saturn are coming together. That's coming up. So it's all part of it. Yeah. But Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So it's like really expanding the heat and making things like bigger than they are for a brief moment. And we'll be seeing this cool off kind of around like April 12th is when things are going to start chilling out just a little bit. But we've got a few more weeks left of this like heavy intensity.
I think this is like, thank you so much, because I think just having kind of this awareness that this is what's the underlying tone, that we just can know that, okay, this too shall pass. You know, I think my mom always like said this to me, you know, if there's any sort of upset that's happening in our life, like, yes, this is going to pass. It won't last forever. And to just disassociate so that we can understand that it's not just us. Like, we're not the only ones experiencing this, which can be hard for people if they're isolated at home by themselves. And not understanding that there's like so much more at play. And I feel like this information can be so useful, as you said, so people can go, oh, okay, I just got to buckle up, like put on some good movies for a while.
Yeah.
Pay my toenails, maybe read a couple books, learn something new, play some music, like expand in other ways, and like really learn how to like ride the wave instead of be totally consumed by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's there's no better time than now, and I've been saying this since this happened, for kind of like we have no other option really but to sit still and to self-inquire and go within, and this is such a great invitation for that. And it's also kind of a gift too, because when else would we have sat this still? When else would the world have paused like this and given everyone such unifying global perspective as human beings, as opposed to getting lost into like our everyday egoic desires of like, maybe, I don't know, trying to be the best at something in your career, and which is great, you know, but at the same time, it's so amazing to be able to actually chill out and ask ourselves, like, how am I living right now? Do I actually like this? Is this to my highest and best truth, you know?
Oh my gosh, like so much yes to that. And also, like, our carbon emissions have dropped significantly. It's possible that this could be one of the best things that has ever happened to us as a human society and as the planet. Apart from people who are sick and suffering and that there's death involved, but for those of us who do have our health and do feel like stable, we have our basic necessities met, it gives us an opportunity to like go into self-care. Like, we have that amazing gift. So I'm so with you. Like, I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so moving into the second question that came up while you were talking. So when you go through tarot readings, do you feel like there's a sense of tapping into someone's like higher self, where you're almost like channeling that, and that's the energy that's being transmitted into the cards?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many different variables at play with a tarot reading, and one of them is exactly that, is tapping into a person's field and just bringing, I call it bringing the vibes to the table, you know, and the energy that they bring to the experience is going to indicate what comes up in the cards. And I actually like to draw, in one of the larger readings that I do, is a message from your higher self. And that's one of the like last cards in the whole thing that we look at. But it's always a really profound answer and piece of perspective to the rest of the reading. So I think that there is kind of a direct channel with that to like higher wisdom and unfiltered truth, and getting kind of past the egoic filters of being in this realm of consciousness.
Yes, awesome. Okay, that was one of the things that I wanted to just like confirm, because I've certainly felt that both when you have done readings for me and when I've drawn cards myself. I'm not a master at all. I'm just like, we're just going to let my energy guide this, and I just read in the book. But I wanted to kind of hear from you, like what it was sensing. So I love that you're like tapping into someone else's energy field. And then that also says that if for whatever reason, if we're like, sometimes I'll feel blocked like I'm not really connected with my higher self, like my energy, it's got crap that I'm carrying around from other people maybe. And then what I do pull ends up being like, that doesn't make any sense. Like it's not resonating.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say about that part?
Yes, that is a constant experience, I think, with everyone who draws cards. And by the way, I think it's really awesome, even if you don't understand the tarot really, really deeply, if you're just drawing cards and reading, that's super powerful and a really wonderful practice. But if you feel like it's not landing, a lot of the time, couple different things. There are lots of variables. So if you're feeling a little bit off your own center and you're not feeling grounded and you're feeling like you're kind of operating up here and you're detached from your body, you're detached from your experience, then a lot of the time the cards are going to be a little bit fuzzy. Another thing too is if one is thinking about a lot of different things at that given time, it sends like a mixed signal, and it almost isn't like a clear message in order to communicate. So what I suggest is clearing your field out, getting really centered, getting very specific, and that helps a lot with the clarity. Another thing too is I like to think about the cards as a tool for orientation no matter where you are. So, you know, like if you're trying to choose between two things and then your friend is like, okay, I'm going to put them behind my back and choose a hand. And you're like, right hand. And then it's like, oh, actually, I think I wanted the other thing more now that I see this thing, which I think the cards can do that too, where you see a card that doesn't resonate at all. But then you think, what if that resonated? Or it just gives you a point of reference in order to get a little bit more like clarity on what you're thinking about.
I like it. Yeah. And it also makes me think, you know, if you were to ask someone 3 different questions and you only wanted one answer, it just wouldn't work.
Totally. Yeah.
Two just don't go together.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. And then as you look at the anagram, well, okay, so do you feel like you've kind of shared the things that we had discussed about with astrology first and then tarot so far?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, because I thought that was so awesome. Like, I love it. And informative and useful. And so when we look at the anagram, kind of what do you start to look at and dive into when you work with people with the anagram?
So the Enneagram is such an awesome tool to work with the astrological chart. And I'm personally just kind of a nerd for personality typing anyway. So the Enneagram is kind of similar to Myers-Briggs in a sense, where you get a type. But with the Enneagram, it's 1 through 9. And so these are all supposed to be different aspects of the human psyche. And the thing that I love about it is that they all sort of work together in a way. So you have different avenues that you can explore with it. It's called like path of integration versus path of disintegration. So there's this whole like 1 through 10 of how healthy one is and how fragmented one is. And it gives you kind of like stepping stones of like, okay, that would look like that if I was in a little bit more of a clear headspace, as opposed to when I'm feeling really out of sorts, I'm kind of more over here. And the thing that I also really love about it is that you're not born with an Enneagram type. This develops between the ages of 1 through 3. So very, very early on. This has a lot to do with nature and nurture, and also just your childhood. So I think that our childhood and the patterns that we develop just carry on for our lives until we work with them and face them. And the Enneagram is a really awesome tool to be able to get clear on that. So if you're doing a lot of personal work in that realm, this is a really helpful tool to be able to put some names and get some like vocabulary and verbiage to what it is that you're experiencing and how to transmute that into healing.
I love that. I didn't know that about 1 to 3. That's fascinating. So then it's not necessarily based on your astrological chart?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So, the kind of astrology that I love is evolutionary astrology, and this would be relevant for a person that believes in reincarnation. So, if you believe that our souls are infinite and that we choose these lives in order to evolve every single time, and say, before you're born, you decide what kind of family dynamic you want, because that is going to elicit a specific kind of growth and a specific kind of catalyst, as opposed to just kind of appearing in something random, and different personality traits and different things. And if you look at personality traits almost as, like, I don't want to say coping mechanisms, but sometimes people act a certain way because something had happened in their life to make that happen, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So with the astrology chart, it's kind of like, if you believe in that, then it's sort of, yes, your Enneagram type might be predetermined by that, but that kind of goes out into speculation.
Yes. Okay, I totally understand.
Cool.
For sure. And I'm one of those people who believes in reincarnation, and I believe that we chose our family. So then it makes sense that if we had already predestined and chose that, then we would have essentially chosen like the path that that family would have taken us in, which would have led us to what our Enneagram type is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Just wrapping it up so I make sure that I understand. Yeah.
Totally.
Makes sense. Very cool. And so when you do readings for people, whether it is astrology, tarot, or with the Enneagram, am I saying this right, by the way?
It's like Enneagram.
Enneagram. Oh, okay. Now I got it. Enneagram. So when you're doing readings, are you doing one? Like, are each of them individual, or do you sometimes fuse them?
It depends on what the client wants. So usually I'll start with their birth chart, and that is the root of everything. And if they're more specifically looking for the really deep self-inquiry and understanding, and I use the Enneagram as a tool in tandem with the birth chart to work together. And so the birth chart's going to show you kind of where you're coming from, what energies are relevant for you and your personality, what your defaults are, what your patterns are. And with the chart, it's not so static as much as it's something that you can work with, because I think that understanding and acknowledgement of a specific pattern is the freedom from that pattern. And you can make the choice to play into that pattern or not. And you can heal once you know it's there, rather than just kind of living unconsciously. So I feel like the Enneagram puts that into action. Like the natal chart, birth chart tells us what it is, and the Enneagram is like, okay, this is kind of how you work with it, and this is more expanding on it.
So cool. And I remember when you introduced oh my gosh, Enneagram to me, and I was like hooked immediately, because I'm totally a junkie for personality types and just understanding ourselves deeper and looking at all the aspects that might come into flow. So I love that you are using that as a tool with astrology, because I don't hear about that very much, right? I don't hear about the astrology and that being played together. So I think that's very, very cool. Yes. So last question here, because I've been thinking about this. Do you think that you would want to draw one card reading for the audience?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And another thing, speaking of tarot, that I realized that I haven't covered yet is everyone has a life path number. And so this is derived from numerology, and you add up your birthday and it gives you one number. So you reduce it down to anything. If we're speaking in terms of like the tarot life path, it's going to be anything between 1 and 21. And so you have this card that's your life path, which doesn't necessarily mean that you identify with it, but that it's one of your greatest lessons in life. So, for example, I'm a 9 for my life path card, and that's the Hermit. And the Hermit is all about, it's about not so much isolation, but empowerment and aloneness, and also paving the way towards like new ideas. The Hermit is holding a lantern. You've probably seen the album cover of, why am I blanking? Led Zeppelin. Yeah. And so the light is this illumination of a path less traveled. And so a lot of one's inner journey is alone and learning how to cope alone. And that's in my life been one of the hardest things up until I started doing really deep work, was like, I really didn't want to be alone. And like abandonment was the worst. And I was like, oh God. And then once I started doing the work, I'm like, oh, okay, there's some really deep empowerment here where I never, ever would have identified like, yeah, I'm the Hermit, you know, but it would have been, it's been like my greatest lesson for sure. So that's kind of a fun one to look at.
That's amazing, because I'm also a 9.
Ooh.
The last tarot card I drew was the Hermit.
Ooh. Yeah.
So, I mean, for those of you that are watching, I love this. I feel like the more you kind of get into this, the more synchronicities like this start to come up in your life. You know, you just start to be a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more in tune with the things around you. And yeah, and then knowing what your life path number is and knowing kind of like the direction that you can take that might be hard at first, but the path of that's going to lead you to like your highest calling can be so deeply helpful. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And now we're like all in isolation.
Yeah, we're all hermits now.
I'm like, I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, yes, finally some time.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That was perfect. Yes. All right. Anything that we missed?
I think we covered it all, at least for now.
For now, exactly. This is just a taster.
Yes.
Just a taster. Okay. Do you want to draw a card?
I'd love to. Let me go grab my deck.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. So, yeah, the deck that I love is the Thoth deck. It's very beautiful. Recommend checking it out. A card. Okay. Oh my. So the thing that I love about this deck is it's super real. And it does not just cater to light and fluffy. And I think that it's very good to take a look at contrast and be able to hold space for more challenging messages and take them for what they are and not for the reaction to them. So the card that I pulled is Debauch. And yep, it's the 7 of Cups. So as you can see, it is a very slimy atmosphere. And the cups signify emotions. So the thing about this is it's a lot of sticky, heavy emotions, a lot of toxicity that's being stirred up. And you think about what's going on right now collectively, a lot of people's stuff is getting stirred up, you know, and people are feeling afraid. They're feeling triggers from their childhoods maybe, and maybe experiencing some of their greatest fears. Maybe they have the Hermit card and they haven't done a ton of work yet and they're super afraid of being alone. And maybe they're stuck in their apartments right now. And so the thing about this is like, it's it just needs to be cleared, and it kind of needs to take its course. And you can even look at it, like the imagery kind of looks like snot too, you know, mucus, and thinking about like the virus that's going around, and it's just like what's the body's response when it creates mucus is to get the thing out, right? So we're cleaning ourselves. This is coming up in order to be healed, in order to be seen. And it's very emotional, being the cups. So any emotional responses right now is just asking to be held. Mars, like I was talking about earlier, coming into the scope of like heating things up, causing that catalyst, you know, it's all part of it. So I think this is pretty appropriate for what's happening right now.
I would so agree. I think that's like the perfect card for what's happening.
Yeah.
And something else that just the thought that comes to mind is like we've had so many distractions throughout, you know, the last few years, and now we're at home and we don't have those distractions. We don't have parties. We're not going on trips. We're not going out to dinner. For performers in our circle, like nobody's performing. They're not doing their gigs. And so we're really like faced with whatever comes up. We don't have anywhere to hide. So that card just totally makes so much sense, because it was almost like things are overflowing, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just like everything that's been stuck in there is just bubbling up and over, and we get to heal it.
Yes.
Which is such a beautiful thing.
Totally.
And we're not bothered either. Like people don't have to bother us during this time.
Yeah. Very true.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a perfect opportunity to heal old stuff. Overflowing snot. Yeah.
Overflowing snot. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, that was perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my dear, it was so good to have you on. I'm so excited. And for those who are watching, we're going to have Anna come on to our Green Door platform more often. And if you are looking to get in contact with Anna, how should people find you right now, Anna?
So my website is houseofsauvage.com, and Sauvage is spelled Sauvage. My site is a little bit under construction at the moment because I'm building some new things for it. So you will be able to email me at inquire@houseofsauvage.com. I'm also on Instagram at anastasia.sauvage.
Beautiful. And we'll also put these in the details as well. So we have the writing so people don't have to understand if they're getting it right or wrong. Yeah, so we'll have all of the links to get a hold of Anna if you'd like. And I mean, this was awesome. This was super fun for me because obviously I'm into this stuff. But it was just so cool to give you a space and hear you talk about it, because I know you've been passionate about it for so long. And now we just get to share your passion and your expertise with more people, which is just so cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.